Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight we're stepping into a different kind of nightmare, not one drenched in blood or echoing with screams, but something quieter, softer, more polite. You're not being tortured, you're being decorated. You're not a prisoner, you're a lady in waiting, which sounds elegant, dignified, maybe even important. It isn't. It's just a slower death, dressed in velvet and powdered with rose water to hide the rot. You'll be expected to smile while starving, flirt without meaning it, and stand perfectly still for 6 hours while your feet scream beneath you. Your job is to orbit a queen who could ruin you with a glance, and eventually probably will. So before the gossip turns poisonous and you're quietly erased from court records, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. But only if this is the kind of historical misery you enjoy falling asleep to. Leave a comment with where you're listening from and how long you think you'd last without collapsing in the privy. Personally, I'd fake a faint and run. Now settle in, breathe slowly, and practice your curtsy. Let's begin. You've made it. After years of stiff curtsies, silent meals, and being told to speak only when spoken to, you finally made it to the royal court of King Henry VIII. More specifically, you've been assigned to serve his queen, Anne Boleyn if you're lucky, Catherine Howard if you're not. Either way, your life is no longer your own. You're not here because you're special. You're here because your family's just noble enough to be useful, and just powerless enough to be ignored. The ideal combination for human furniture. Your job title is Lady in Waiting, which sounds elegant. It isn't. You're a glorified servant with expensive sleeves. You're expected to stand for hours in silence, look decorative, and attend to the Queen's every whim, unless her whims change, in which case you'll be blamed for not anticipating them. You'll live in shared quarters that smell like mildew and regret, and you'll share a bed with 2 girls who both snore and probably hate you already. Your gown will weigh more than a small dog, and you'll wear it in July. The palace is a maze of stone-cold drafts and unspoken rules. No one explains them to you. You'll be judged for talking too much, for talking too little, for smiling at the wrong person, or not smiling at all. You're not a person here. You're an extension of the Queen's reputation, and if she falls out of favour, and she will, your head may go with hers. There is no safety here, only survival, and even that is temporary. You arrive at court with your best smile, your least wrinkled dress, and the kind of naive optimism that will get you quietly destroyed within the week. The carriage ride was long and rattling. Your luggage was packed by someone who hates you, and your shoes were not designed for walking across muddy courtyards. But still, you clutch your mother's final words. Make a good impression, like they're a shield against what's waiting inside. They aren't. The court doesn't want your good impression. It wants your silence, your obedience, and your willingness to bleed for a woman who might not remember your name. The palace is enormous, cold, and somehow already unimpressed with you. Servants rush past, nobility sneer in passing, and no one tells you where to go. Eventually, a woman with 2 tight sleeves and a face like soured milk calls your name without looking up from her parchment. She takes one glance at you, sighs with disappointment, and gestures for you to follow. You try to ask a question, something simple, like where you'll be staying, but she shushes you like a naughty child. Speaking already? Dangerous move. You're off to a great start. Your room, if we're being generous with the term, is a shared space the size of a livestock stall, with a low ceiling, 1 drafty window, and 3 other women who assess you, like they're deciding whether to eat you or just let you rot quietly. You smile at them. 1 frowns, another snorts. The 3rd doesn't bother acknowledging you at all. You're assigned the bed closest to the chamber pot, which turns out to be the one perk of arriving last. It's the only one not infested with visible lice. Probably. You're not given time to unpack. You're not given time to rest. You're stripped, literally, in the corner of the room, by a bored maid who mutters something about fleas and sin. and then douses you with water that smells faintly of onions and regret. She hands you a gown that looks like it was made for someone taller, richer, and significantly more dead. It's too tight in the bodice, too loose at the waist, and missing 2 buttons in the back. You're told it will do for now. You nod because that's what you're expected to do. Your ribs scream, you do not. Your shoes are replaced with something flatter and uglier. Your hair is brushed aggressively into a style that's less about fashion and more about submission. You're powdered until you smell like a rose that's been stomped on by a sweaty nobleman. You thought this moment, your arrival, your first day, would feel like a coronation. It feels more like an auction. You're cleaned and dressed not for comfort, but for display. You belong to the Queen now, or more accurately, to her chamberlain, who might allow you to breathe in her presence if you behave. You're taken through the winding, echoing halls and deposited outside the Queen's apartments. You're not invited in, you're not introduced, you're told to wait, and so you do, standing on cold flagstone in a dress that itches and pinches and smells faintly of the last girl who wore it. You wait for 27 minutes while courtiers brush past you as though you're furniture. One of them coughs directly in your face and doesn't even blink. That's the kind of place this is. Eventually, a lady of slightly higher rank than you emerges and calls you forward. You follow her into a chamber that is, to your shock, even less welcoming than the corridor. The Queen is not smiling. She does not rise, she glances at you, and then returns her attention to a small mirror, adjusting her hood as if your presence has already bored her. You drop into a practiced curtsy. You hold it until your legs ache. No one tells you to rise. You do anyway, eventually, because no one seems to notice you're there. You are introduced by name, though it is pronounced incorrectly. You do not correct them. The Queen murmurs something about your hair being tolerable and then dismisses you with a flick of her fingers. You're expected to be thrilled by this. One of the older ladies nudges you and mutters, "That went well." You nod again, like you've been told a joke you didn't understand, but are too scared to question. This is the rhythm now. Smile, nod, curtsy, wait. You'll get it eventually, or you'll be sent home in disgrace, whichever comes first. That night, you return to your shared room, where your roommates have already claimed the least awful blankets and eaten the most edible pieces of bread. Your stomach is knotted with hunger, and your feet are blistered, but you're too exhausted to complain. You settle into bed with your back to the wall and try to sleep while someone sobs quietly on the other side of the room. There's no privacy, no comfort, no one who wants you here. You are replaceable. Everyone knows it, especially you. Somewhere down the hall, music plays. Someone is laughing. You imagine the Queen reclining on her cushion-stuffed chair, being fed figs by a page boy with better shoes than yours. You wonder what would happen if you simply walked away, if you crept down the corridor and vanished into the fog outside the palace gates. You won't, of course. You've been trained too well for that. You'll stay, you'll survive, or something close enough to it that no one bothers asking questions. You pull the lice-ridden blanket tighter around your shoulders and try to think of something comforting. But there's nothing here for comfort. There's only survival, and even that is uphill. You wake before dawn to the sound of someone else coughing, wet, heavy, and repetitive. The kind of sound that reminds you just how thin the walls are, and how generous people are with their germs. There's no warmth in the room. The fire has gone out, and no one wants to relight it because the smoke clogs the chimney and makes your eyes water for hours. Instead, you shiver out of your lice-ridden blanket and begin the daily ritual of clothing yourself like a sacrificial offering to the god of royal appearances. Your undergarments go on first, a linen shift that hasn't been properly washed in weeks and smells faintly of mildew, and something worse you don't care to name. Over that, your stays. Corsetry, they call it, though that word doesn't quite capture the violence of it. Your roommate tightens the laces while you hold the bedpost and try not to grunt like a hog. You can't breathe properly once she's done. That's normal. It means it's working. The goal is to appear slender, noble, and upright, not conscious. Then the real layering begins, a farthingale to shape your skirts into something that resembles a bell tower. Petticoats, stockings, bodice, overgown, sleeves. You don't put on a dress, you assemble it like a siege weapon. The weight drags at your shoulders, but posture is non-negotiable, so you straighten your back and pretend it doesn't feel like a small child is clinging to you all day. The fabric is scratchy. The brocade digs into your ribs. Your arms can barely lift above your waist. And that's the point. The more helpless you appear, the more elegant you supposedly look. And then the hair. Your hair is not your own anymore. It belongs to the court. It must be braided, pinned, curled, or coiled depending on the day, the Queen's mood, or whether some dowager countess with nothing better to do has decided blue ribbons are unfashionable this week. Hair powder is applied liberally. It smells like crushed flowers that died badly. You have no mirror. You rely on your roommates to tell you if you look passable. They lie. Everyone lies. Makeup, such as it is mostly chalk and crushed beetle. A pale face means status. It says you don't have to labour in the sun or interact with the outdoors at all. It also means you look vaguely ghost-like, which is a trend now, apparently. Rouge is allowed, but only if it doesn't make you look common. What exactly counts as common changes hourly. 1 minute you're radiant, the next you're overheated. Either way, you don't get to decide. You get to endure. There is no soap. Not real soap anyway. You dab at your neck and wrists with rose water or vinegar, depending on what you can sneak from the apothecary. Bathing, actual bathing, is considered indulgent, maybe even dangerous. The current medical opinion is that warm water opens the pores, inviting in disease. So instead of bathing, you mask, you cover up, you perfume, you layer smell upon smell until it becomes a kind of armour. You smell like roses and sweat and old meat, and so does everyone else. You'd think that would create some kind of camaraderie, a mutual agreement to not mention the collective stench. It doesn't. You're still judged, harshly. A stain on your sleeve is a moral failing. Wrinkled skirts are signs of laziness. A bit of dandruff means you're practically diseased. Women who barely eat and sleep still manage to whisper about how your cuffs look less than fresh. You develop paranoia over collars. You begin checking hems obsessively. You panic over imaginary blemishes. Eventually, the shame becomes instinct. The Queen, of course, looks immaculate. Always. That's because she has 3 women dressing her. 1 woman brushing her hair, and another 2 who do nothing but clean and starch her linens. You see her for maybe 10 minutes a day, and every time you do, you wonder how she manages to look so composed when everyone else is one misstep away from collapsing into a puddle of sweat and humiliation. Then you remember, she doesn't dress herself. She doesn't even stand without assistance. Her version of suffering is a servant poking her with a pin during a fitting. Yours is bleeding through your stays and being told to smile anyway. Summer is the worst. The palace turns into a slow cooker. The dresses become unbearable. The fabric clings. Your thighs chafe. Your stockings slide down, and you're not allowed to adjust them without retreating to the chamber, which you won't have time for. You sweat in silence, pretending not to feel the trickle down your spine or the damp patch growing behind your knees. No one talks about it. You're just expected to endure. And to remember that it could be worse. At least you're not one of the scullery maids who faints weakly in the kitchens and is dragged outside like a sack of flour. You once overheard a foreign ambassador describe English women as elegant and fragrant. You're not sure who he met, but it wasn't anyone in your hallway. You're not fragrant. You're a combination of human decay and cosmetic bravado. Your dress hasn't been properly washed in 3 months, because laundry's expensive, and drying clothes in English weather is a joke. You spray more rose water. It helps for 5 minutes. Then the sweat wins again. Every step you take echoes through layers of fabric and expectation. You can't run. You can't bend. You can barely sit without needing help to get back up. You are trussed and powdered, corseted and coiffed, until your entire body becomes a performance. One that never ends. One that no one claps for. And if you're lucky, if you do it all just right, no one will notice you at all. Which is, in the end, the closest thing to safety you'll get. There's a schedule, though no one has written it down. It lives in the minds of the senior ladies and in the eyes of the chamberlain, who seems to know instinctively when it's time to parade, pray, or pretend something unremarkable is worth applauding. Your days are long, repetitive, and somehow still exhausting. They begin with standing, lots of standing. Standing beside a door, standing behind a chair, standing in a line while the Queen picks a necklace or scolds someone for bringing the wrong velvet wrap. Your feet go numb quickly, but you are not allowed to shift your weight too obviously. Sway and you look drunk. Slump and you look bored. Faint and you look dramatic. None of these are acceptable. Occasionally, you're allowed to sit. This sounds like a blessing, but it isn't. Sitting is ceremonial. You sit when the Queen sits, at her command, and usually just long enough for your legs to begin tingling. Then you stand again. You're not here to rest. You're here to create an atmosphere, one of attentive elegance and silent adoration. If the Queen sighs, you must look concerned. If she sneezes, you must bless her. If she says the venison was a touch dry, you must pretend that's the most daring opinion anyone has ever voiced. Your own opinions are not welcome. You will not be asked what you think about the political situation in France or the rising tension with the Northern Earls. You will not be consulted on religion, architecture, poetry, or anything else that might suggest you have an interior life. You will, however, be asked whether Lady Pembroke's new sleeves are flattering, or whether you noticed that Lady Margaret's waist has expanded somewhat since last spring. These are the only subjects on which your voice carries any weight: fashion and scandal. The two pillars of female utility. The Queen spends most of her time doing very little, but she does it with great importance. You watch her embroider half a flower for 3 hours. You watch her stare into a polished mirror for longer than some peasants live. You hold her comb, her mirror, her prayer book. You hand her rings when she wants to fidget. You listen when she talks about her aching joints or her suspicions about one of the maids. You nod sympathetically, but never with too much enthusiasm, lest you think you're mocking her. You laugh politely when she tells a story she's told 8 times this week. You are, in essence, furniture with facial expressions. Sometimes she lets you do her hair. This is meant to be an honour. It's also a test. If the pins are too tight, you've offended her. If they're too loose, you're incompetent. If she catches you looking bored in the mirror, she'll remember it and bring it up later, probably in front of someone important. You've learned to perfect the art of the soft smile, the one that says, you're attentive, but not intrusive, admiring, but not threatening. It hurts your cheeks, you do it anyway. There's embroidery too, of course, endless embroidery. You work on the same strip of floral trim for weeks, stitching until your fingers blister, because God forbid the Queen's new gown have 1 inch of unadorned fabric. You sit beside her while she works on her own piece, or pretends to, while you do most of the actual sewing. She says she finds embroidery calming. You find it tedious and hand-cramping, but you nod, as if she's just revealed a profound universal truth. That's the game. She plays at being engaged. You play at being invisible. When court visitors arrive, foreign dignitaries, envoys, or the occasional unlucky poet summoned to read some badly composed flattery, you are expected to be part of the backdrop. Smile. Listen. Don't speak unless introduced, and even then speak softly, and only to praise something. The Queen's dress, the King's judgment, the glorious English weather, even if it's raining sideways through a cracked window. You are an ornament to the Queen's magnificence, and you must shine exactly as much as she wants you to. No more. The irony is you're constantly visible, but never truly seen. Everyone knows your name, but no one uses it unless it's to summon you. The men at court might leer or whisper, but they'll never write sonnets for someone like you. The senior ladies might give you orders, but they won't remember your birthday. You are not meant to be memorable. You are meant to blend in. If you disappear tomorrow, someone else will take your place by morning. No one will ask where you went. You're reminded of this invisibility most clearly during meals. Not the grand banquets. You're not important enough to sit at those, but the daily ones, the informal ones, where you're allowed to eat in shifts. The Queen eats first, slowly, with 10 eyes watching her for cues. You hover, waiting for her to be satisfied, before sneaking off to eat whatever's left. Sometimes it's dried bread soaked in wine. Sometimes it's something grey. You eat fast, in silence, and then return to your post before anyone notices you're gone. Hunger is a constant, but complaints are not tolerated. You're fortunate to be here after all. What no one tells you, and what you quickly learn, is that being a lady in waiting is not about usefulness or competence. It's about presence. Controlled, inoffensive, utterly replaceable presence. You exist to fill space gracefully. You are not here to be interesting. You are here to look interested. That's the entire job. And you do it, day after day, without question. Because not doing it comes with consequences you'd rather not explore. Because being noticed for the wrong reasons is worse than not being noticed at all. Because even the illusion of favour is better than the certainty of disgrace. And so you keep standing, keep smiling, keep holding mirrors, fetching combs, and pretending that your every motion is voluntary. You do not matter. You cannot matter. Not here. Not in this place where even queens can vanish overnight. Courtly love, you're told, is the lifeblood of Tudor romance. A noble tradition, a game of chivalry and longing, where men pine and women gently deny. Poets write verses, lutes are plucked, tokens are exchanged. Everyone pretends their feelings are delicate and tragic, instead of sweaty and opportunistic. It's supposed to be thrilling, elegant, refined. It isn't. It's exhausting, it's dangerous, and like everything else at court, it's another performance you're expected to master, without instruction and without ever slipping. You're expected to be charming, of course, pleasant to look at, pleasant to listen to, pleasant to imagine in someone else's bed, though never quite pleasant enough to justify the thought. It's a balancing act no one survives for long. You must be warm, but not too warm, playful, but not inviting, clever, but not cleverer than the man in front of you, especially if he outranks you, and they all do. Flirtation is currency here, but it's counterfeit. You can't spend it anywhere without someone accusing you of treason. If you ignore the wrong man, you're called a prude, a cold little thing, ungrateful for attention. If you respond too openly, you're whispered about behind painted fans. A fast girl, loose, probably diseased. It doesn't matter how you meant it. It only matters how it's perceived. And at court, perception is fact, and facts are optional. You walk a line so thin it might as well be a knife. Most days it feels like it is. The men are relentless. They call it gallantry. You call it being cornered in a corridor by a duke who smells like clove oil and spoiled wine. They offer you poetry and pretend it's affection. They brush your sleeve and call it fate. They're usually twice your age, with twice the arrogance and half the teeth. One of them once told you that your eyes reminded him of a hunting dog he'd once owned. You smiled. That's what you're trained to do. Smile, curtsy, and escape as politely as possible. You've learned to redirect with compliments, to pass the attention along to someone else without seeming rude. But it never really works. You're not allowed to say no, not in so many words. A firm no would be considered uncouth, unwomanly, even unpatriotic. You'd be insulting a man's honour, and that could ruin you faster than any actual scandal. So you perfect the art of avoidance. You invent headaches. You fake sudden obligations. You become fluent in the language of subtle exits. Meanwhile, the Queen notices. She notices who looks at you too long, who lingers in conversation, who sends you gifts that you aren't technically allowed to receive. If she decides you're drawing too much attention, it becomes your fault, even if you did everything right. Especially if you did everything right. A beautiful woman who causes no trouble is a pleasant diversion. A beautiful woman who might become competition, that's a liability, and liabilities don't last long. There are stories, half whispers and cautionary tales of ladies who got too close to the wrong man. One was caught exchanging letters with a married courtier. She was sent home in disgrace, never seen again. Another is said to have received a kiss behind the tapestry. 2 weeks later, she fell mysteriously ill. The lesson is always the same. Do nothing, and if something happens anyway, deny it, disappear, or die. Those are your options. The king himself is the unspoken horror behind all this. If he looks your way, you're supposed to be honoured. You're also supposed to be terrified, because if he wants you, you can't refuse. And once he's done with you, which could take a night or a year, you'll be quietly removed, married off to a minor nobleman with debts, or bundled into a nunnery with no vows. Either way, your name will never be mentioned again. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, you become the next queen, which sounds like a triumph until you remember what happens to queens here. The pearls, the gowns, the banquets, they all come with a blade attached. The king's love is a fever, and like all fevers, it breaks suddenly and leaves wreckage behind. Every lady in waiting knows this, and every one of you is quietly hoping to be overlooked. Better to be forgotten than crowned and then condemned. Even among your fellow ladies, love is a liability. If you actually fall for someone, really fall, you're doomed. Because now you have something to lose, a secret to protect. And secrets are a kind of currency too, but the kind that tends to explode in your face. You've seen it happen. A glance too long, a letter mislaid, a careless touch in the garden. The gossip spreads faster than plague, and there's no inoculation. Your name will be stained long before anyone bothers to ask if the story is true. And yet, in this miserable little ecosystem, a strange truth takes root. Loneliness is constant, but affection is rare. You ache for kindness, for conversation that doesn't come with an agenda. Sometimes, when a man smiles at you without hunger in his eyes, you allow yourself to imagine what it might be like to be chosen for who you are. Then you remember that no one here cares who you are, only what you can offer, and how quietly you can offer it. There are moments, late at night, when your thoughts drift. You imagine love as something simple, a hand held in secret, a laugh shared without consequence. But those are dangerous thoughts, treasonous thoughts, and so you bury them, along with all the other things you're not allowed to want. You train your heart to flutter on cue and remain still the rest of the time. It's safer that way. You learn over time to treat attention like fire. Stand near it, feel its warmth, but never touch, never get too close, never forget that it will burn you eventually, and no one will care that you are only trying to stay warm. Feasting is one of the great illusions of court life. All abundance on the outside, all gnawing emptiness within. To the outsider, it seems like you're surrounded by luxury. Platters piled with roasted meats, towers of marzipan shaped like castles, sweet wine poured until the floor becomes sticky. But the truth, like everything here, is less impressive when you're living it. You may stand in the same room as a feast, but you're not part of it. You are not there to eat. You're there to assist, to observe, and above all, to never appear hungry. Hunger is unseemly. It suggests you're human. Banquet days begin early, Before anyone lifts a goblet or picks at a pomegranate seed, you are already awake, helping the queen get dressed in layers of finery, so heavy she needs assistance to sit down without falling sideways. You wrestle her into stiff sleeves, lace her up until she can't breathe, pin every curl of her hair while she hisses complaints about the draft, her digestion, or someone else's gown. It takes hours. You hold her jewellery while she deliberates. You hold your tongue while she panics over a slightly wilted headdress. By the time the feast begins, you already feel like you've been trampled. You accompany her into the hall, where the air is thick with sweat, perfume, and the smell of roasted meat beginning to go slightly off. The nobility gather like peacocks in heat, each one elbowing for a seat closer to the king, or someone marginally more important than they are. You remain standing, always waiting. Your stomach growls audibly around the time the first course is announced, but if anyone hears it, they'll pretend they didn't. That's the etiquette. Starvation is invisible. The queen is served first, of course, and you are beside her. You hold her napkin, pass her goblet, smile while she eats, and nod as if her every complaint about the underseasoned venison is profound. She nibbles delicately. You breathe through your mouth to avoid smelling too much of the grease pooling at the edges of her plate. You are close enough to see the juice run down her chin, close enough to hear her chew, but you are not invited to join her. The food itself is a spectacle. Whole animals roasted with their feathers reattached, eels shaped like mythical beasts, custards moulded to look like famous landmarks. It's all meant to impress, to dazzle, not to nourish. The nobility are there to be seen eating, not to actually eat. You are there to look at food you'll never touch. Your own meal will come hours later, if at all, and it will not include mythical eels. When it's finally your turn, if you're lucky enough to be excused in time, you descend into the servants' hall, where the scraps are dumped into uneven piles and passed off as supper. There is meat sometimes, but it's often stringy, undercooked or suspiciously grey. You learn to sniff everything before committing. Bread is safe mostly. Cheese is a gamble. Stewed vegetables are always mushy and usually boiled into oblivion. Wine, if there is any left, tastes like someone stored it in a boot. You drink it anyway. It's that or water, and no one in their right mind drinks the water. You learn quickly that food at court isn't about hunger. It's about hierarchy. Who gets served first? Who gets the most? Who gets mentioned in the kitchen ledger? And who gets forgotten? Hunger is a tool like everything else. If the kitchen steward doesn't like you, you'll go without. If a senior lady is feeling petty, she'll have your portion redirected. You once spent 2 days on nothing but hard bread and dried plums because someone overheard you whisper that Lady Kent's sleeves looked a bit last season. She heard. She made sure you felt it. And then there's what happens after eating, the consequences. Digestion here is not a gentle affair. The food is heavy, the preparation is questionable, and no one's heard of a balanced meal. You have constant stomach pain. Diarrhea is a weekly visitor. Bloating becomes a way of life. The privies are overused and undercleaned, and you share them with dozens of other women who are all dealing with the same questionable meat and day-old cream. It's not uncommon to hear someone vomiting behind a screen during morning prayers. No one comments. That would be rude. Despite this, you're expected to maintain a figure. Thin, but not too thin. Full, but not indulgent. Glowing, but not ruddy. No one explains how you're meant to achieve this on pigeon scraps and prune juice, but it's expected nonetheless. You develop rituals to manage appearances, tight stays to flatten a bloated stomach, pinching your cheeks for colour, biting your lips to make them pinker before entering a room. Everyone's doing it. No one admits it. Occasionally there's a rumour that a foreign noblewoman brought something new, a spice, a technique, a miracle tonic that settles the stomach or sharpens the mind. You try it once. It turns out to be powdered beetroot mixed with honey and crushed ants. It makes you vomit for a day and a half. But for a moment, You feel like you are part of something important, something rare. That feeling passes, the stomach pain lingers, and through it all, you smile. At the banquets, in the corridors, even while passing a spoiled joint of lamb you wouldn't feed to a dog. You pretend to be satisfied. You pretend the scraps are a blessing. You make grateful noises when given a bruised pear. Because complaining is for people with leverage. You have none. You are fed at someone else's discretion, and you're expected to be thankful for every bite. Eventually, you stop dreaming about rich food. Your fantasies shrink down to the simple and the soft. Warm bread, ripe fruit, water that doesn't taste like iron. A meal you don't have to earn with silence, a moment of fullness that doesn't come with consequences. But that's not for you, not here. Here, hunger is part of the uniform. If food is scarce at court, gossip is its replacement, more abundant, more dangerous, and far more likely to kill you. It flows through the corridors like perfume and rot, clinging to every gown and curling into every whispered greeting. You can't see it, but you know it's there. You feel it when conversations stop as you walk past, when a laugh rings out just a little too loudly behind your back, when someone asks how you're feeling in that tone that suggests they already know, or think they do. You didn't come to court with a strategy. You came with a comb, 3 dresses, and a prayer. That was your first mistake. Everyone else arrived with alliances already brewing. The daughters of dukes and nieces of earls carry entire networks in their sleeves. They know who to flatter, who to avoid, who's rising and who's about to be accused of treason. You're just trying to remember which way the latrines are. By the time you figure out what's being said, the damage is already done. There's no handbook for this, no orientation scroll. The rules are passed in glances, in giggles behind fans, in sudden silences when someone walks into a room. You're expected to understand instinctively who's fallen out of favour and why you should stop sitting next to them at prayers. You fail naturally. One morning you make the mistake of complimenting Lady Francis's hairstyle. That afternoon, she's accused of hiding letters from a Protestant sympathiser. Coincidence maybe, but now you're on the radar. And once you're on the radar, it's very, very hard to get off. Being quiet doesn't help. Silence makes you suspicious. People assume you're hiding something. They assume you're listening, hoarding secrets, preparing to strike. If you do speak, you risk saying the wrong thing or the right thing to the wrong person. Either way, your words will be repeated, twisted, weaponized, and presented in a way that makes you sound like either a traitor or a fool. And neither of those survive here for long. The worst part is that the lies stick. They don't need to be clever or convincing, just timely. Once someone decides you're a problem, a flirt, a heretic, or a spy, there's no clearing your name. Truth is irrelevant. Reputation is everything. And yours is at the mercy of people who smile to your face while sharpening their knives behind your back. You start noticing patterns. The way gossip moves in waves, always focused on someone. One week it's Lady Anne and her mysterious absences. The next, it's Lord Suffolk's daughter and the rumour that she cried in front of the Queen. You listen, not because you enjoy it, but because you need to know what's safe to say, and more importantly, what isn't. Every conversation is a trap, and you don't even know who's setting it. Your fellow ladies in waiting are not your friends. At best, they are neutral. At worst, they are strategists using you as a stepping stone. They'll ask leading questions with sweet voices. Did you hear what the Queen said about Lady Margaret's gown? Do you think Lord Russell spends too much time with the chambermaids? Don't answer. Don't smile. Don't blink. Even silence can be interpreted as agreement. An agreement can become evidence. Eventually, someone accuses you of something. It doesn't matter what. Maybe you rolled your eyes at the wrong moment. Maybe you laughed a little too loudly. Maybe someone else needed a distraction. You're pulled aside, questioned gently by someone with dead eyes and a very long memory. You deny everything, of course. But denial sounds defensive. You're told to be more careful. You nod. You thank them. You walk away knowing it won't matter. You try to build alliances, but it's like stitching a garment made of cobwebs. Nothing holds. The moment someone more useful comes along, you're dropped. You learn to keep your thoughts shallow and your expressions shallower. You say things like, "What a beautiful morning," and "Her Majesty looks radiant today," and hope no one notices the exhaustion in your voice. You're becoming fluent in saying nothing at all. You begin to hate the sound of laughter, not because it's cruel, though it often is, but because it means you've missed something. A joke, a reference, a story told in a chamber you weren't invited into. And if you don't know what people are laughing about, you don't know what danger is creeping up behind you. There are informants everywhere, servants who overhear things and sell them to the highest bidder, pages with excellent memories, even priests who mention suspicious confessions. You can't trust anyone. Not the girl who braids your hair, not the lady who shares your bed, not the guard who seems a little too friendly. Everyone has something to gain. And you're the easiest thing to lose. Sometimes you daydream about shouting the truth in the middle of the great hall, about pointing out who started what, who lied, who's manipulating whom. But that fantasy ends the same way every time, with you being escorted out of the palace in disgrace, or worse, truth doesn't matter here, not unless it's useful, and you have nothing anyone wants. You learn slowly to survive the gossip, not to stop it, that's impossible, but to endure it, to walk through a corridor while two women whisper and convince yourself it's about someone else, to hear your name spoken and pretend it wasn't. You tell yourself that as long as you're not being summoned, not being questioned, not being excluded entirely, then you're still safe. You're not, but the lie helps. Eventually, you become part of the machinery, not powerful, not respected, just tolerated. You learn which rumours are harmless and which are lethal. You mimic the language of polite cruelty. You smile when you want to scream. You congratulate your enemies on their good fortune. And if someone falls, publicly, messily, and suddenly, you do what everyone else does. You look away, you survive. You learn quickly that your fate is not your own. It belongs to the queen, or more precisely, to her moods, which shift with the seasons, the phases of the moon, or the way someone addressed her during morning prayers. There are no warnings, no signs posted outside her chamber that say, "Approach with our caution." You simply wake up one morning, walk into her presence, and realize she's already decided whether you're safe or not. Maybe it was something you said 3 weeks ago. Maybe it's the shape of your smile. Maybe it's nothing at all. That won't stop you from paying for it. When the queen is in good spirits, the court breathes easier. She jokes, she smiles, she compliments your stitching, even if it's sloppy. She might ask you to read to her, or invite you to walk in the garden, or toss you a gift, a comb, a ribbon, a glance that could be mistaken for affection. It's tempting to believe you've done something right, that you've earned a shred of her favour, but you haven't. You've just been spared temporarily, and the worst mistake you can make is believing it will last. Because when the queen is displeased, and she often is, her wrath settles on whoever's nearest. That might be the lady who brought her the wrong fan, or the girl whose gown rustled too loudly during mass, or you simply because your face reminded her of a cousin she no longer speaks to. Her rage is not loud. It's slow and soft and cold. She won't scream at you. She'll look through you. Then she'll stop asking for you. Then someone else will be doing your duties and you'll find yourself standing in the corridor, forgotten until the summons arrives. And you always know when it's coming. You feel it in the way the other ladies avoid eye contact, in the way your name stops appearing on the schedule for chamber duties, in the way your seat is moved slightly further from the queen's each day until you're practically in the hallway. You ask no questions. That would make it worse. Instead, you start preparing, emotionally, spiritually, practically, for the possibility that this will be your last week at court. Sometimes the reasons are clear. You wore a gown too similar to hers. You received a compliment from a visiting noble while she stood 2 feet away and was not addressed. You laughed too loudly during supper. She thought you looked too pleased with yourself. But more often, there's no cause, no incident you can point to, just a slow shift in air pressure, like the first signs of an oncoming storm. You learn to dread the days she's quiet, the days she smiles too much, the days she says nothing at all. The Queen is not necessarily cruel, though cruelty here is subjective. She's under constant scrutiny, surrounded by snakes in silks and swords wrapped in flattery. She is expected to be beautiful, composed, fruitful, and beloved, all while being married to a man whose affections move faster than political alliances. Her power is conditional. Her enemies are waiting. She lashes out because it's the only thing she can still control. And you, poor fool, are the nearest target. Her favourites shift weekly. One day, you're the girl she insists sits beside her for prayers. The next, she won't return your bow. You might overhear her praising your embroidery to a visitor and think briefly that she's proud of you. That same night, she tells her physician you look sallow and unwell. Those words will follow you for weeks. They'll show up in conversations you're not part of. They'll become part of your reputation. And reputations here are sticky. You live in a constant state of risk assessment. When the Queen enters the room, you study her face before you curtsy. Does she look rested, irritated, pleased? Has her favourite maid been dismissed? Is her uncle visiting? Did she hear that rumour about her sister again? All of it matters. You adjust accordingly. You change your tone, your expression, the level of deference in your voice. Not too eager, not too aloof. You aim for perfectly invisible. Some ladies believe they can weather it by being indispensable. They rush to fulfill every command, flatter her without pause, agree with her even when she contradicts herself mid-sentence. These women last longer, sometimes, but even they fall, because there's always someone younger, prettier, funnier, or more careful, and because at the end of the day, favour is not armour, it's a spotlight, and the longer you stand in it, the more likely someone will push you off the stage. You make other enemies without trying. Jealous ones, petty ones, ladies who've been waiting months for a moment alone with the Queen, only to see you summoned 3 times in a day. They'll smile while slipping notes under doors, planting rumours like weeds. If the Queen's mood is sour, these whispers grow into accusations. She won't ask if they're true. She'll simply act. A sharp word, a cold shoulder, an absence of invitations. One day you're in, the next, no one remembers you were ever there. And the most terrifying part, even if you do everything right, if you're demure, obedient, invisible, and pleasant, you're still not safe. Because the Queen might wake up in the night, haunted by a dream you were in. Or she might decide, based on nothing at all, that you no longer please her. Or someone she hates might compliment you. Your fate is not tied to your actions. It's tied to her whims. And her whims are under siege. So you wait, every day, watching her for signs of thunder. Reading her silences like scripture. Flinching at every sudden pause in conversation. You pray she doesn't notice you. And when she does, you pray it's not for the last time. Illness at court is not an if, it's a when. You don't avoid it, you delay it, briefly. Eventually, everyone gets sick. Sometimes it starts with a cough that won't leave. Sometimes it's a rash that spreads slowly across someone's throat, just visible under the edge of a ruff. Sometimes it arrives overnight, sudden and hot, dragging entire households down in silence. The court pretends health is a matter of virtue, as though your morals might protect you from contagion. But you live in cramped rooms, share linens with 3 women, and pass combs like they're holy relics. Sooner or later, your number will be up. You start to notice the signs early. A maid fainting during mass. A page boy who stops showing up with no explanation. a nobleman who looks a little yellower than he did yesterday. No one says the words aloud. Plague, sweating sickness, consumption. That would be impolite. Instead, people cough into handkerchiefs and insist it's just the damp. They sweat through their silks and call it summer. You learn to translate. Tired means tuberculosis. Unwell means fever. Gone to visit family means dead. There's no real medical help. The royal physician might be summoned if someone important takes ill, but his treatments are mostly guesswork. Leeches, bleeding, syrups made of honey, and powdered pearls, expensive, impressive, and entirely useless. If you're lucky, he might tell you to rest, but rest isn't something you're allowed. If you wake up feverish, you still dress. If your joints ache, you still serve. You stand beside the queen with your mouth dry and your pulse racing, praying she doesn't ask you to hold her goblet. You can't afford to be seen, sweating more than usual. There's no concept of quarantine. Illness doesn't excuse you, it marks you. If someone thinks you're contagious, you won't be sent away. You'll be quietly avoided, your duties reassigned, your presence noted but unacknowledged. That's worse than exile. You're still expected to perform, but no one will meet your eye. And if you collapse, which has happened to others, in full view of the Queen, you'll be removed by servants, as if the embarrassment matters more than the body. The worst are the fevers that come and go, lingering just long enough to remind you how fragile your body really is. You'll spend days sweating through your shift, swallowing bile, convincing yourself that it's just fatigue. If you complain, you're dramatic. If you stay silent, you risk infecting others and being blamed anyway. So you compromise. You say nothing. You press a cold cloth to your neck before being summoned. You bite your tongue when your teeth start chattering. You hope your hands don't shake too visibly while braiding someone else's hair. You've seen it happen to others. One of the girls in your chamber developed a cough that wouldn't stop. For days she sat up at night, hacking into a cloth until her fingers cramped. Then she stopped getting out of bed. A few of the ladies said prayers. A few more stopped visiting altogether. Eventually, her things were packed up, and she was taken to rest. You never saw her again. No one said the word, but you knew what it was. Consumption. She wasted away like a candle left in the sun. Then there's syphilis, the court's favourite unspoken epidemic. You know who has it by the way they start wearing thicker makeup, by the gloves that never come off, by the quiet, desperate way they smile when someone mentions marriage. It eats away at the body slowly, leaving sores and madness and humiliation behind. But as long as the person is highborn enough, everyone looks the other way. The rest of you, with less impressive titles, will be blamed for your immoral behaviour if you ever so much as sneeze in the wrong company. Smallpox is a different beast. It doesn't whisper, it roars. When it hits, the whole court knows. Faces vanish, rooms are sealed. There's panic, but not enough to actually do anything about it. Too many people are too important to be moved, and if someone survives, they return marked. Pockmarked skin is the scarlet letter of the survivor, proof that you were touched by death but not claimed. Those who can't hide the scars often disappear anyway. No one likes a reminder. You begin carrying little charms, ribbons soaked in vinegar, herbs sewn into your sleeves, prayers folded into your bodice. You don't believe they work, but they make you feel like you're doing something, and that matters. You wash your hands more often, even though the water smells metallic and likely isn't clean. You avoid sharing combs when you can. You press your lips together tightly when someone coughs nearby, as if you can keep the sickness out with sheer willpower. But none of it works. One day, your throat goes dry. Your head aches. Your skin flushes with heat. You pretend you're fine. You perform your duties, slow but steady. You sip wine to hide the shaking. You sit when no one's looking. You tell yourself it's nothing, and for a while, that helps. But it doesn't change what you know deep down. You're going to get sick. You're going to suffer. The only question is how much, and whether you'll walk again when it's done. Because here, illness isn't just physical, it's political. The Queen cannot afford to have sick attendants. Your presence suggests weakness. If she's surrounded by coughing girls with pale faces, people begin to talk. They'll say she's cursed or careless or unclean, and so you become a liability. And liabilities, as you've seen, don't last long. There is no recovery at court, only survival. And even that is temporary. Love, in theory, is supposed to be the grand reward, the thing that makes the rest of the misery bearable. It's what the poets sing about, what the playwrights immortalize, what the court pretends to admire. They dress it up in verse and metaphor, wrap it in flowers and sighs, and insist it's the purest of virtues. But at court, love is less like poetry and more like a loaded crossbow, delicate in appearance, deadly in practice, and almost always pointed at you. Maybe it starts with a glance. You're walking through the garden, trailing behind the Queen, and a courtier notices you. He's well-dressed, well-connected, just old enough to be your father. He smiles. You return it, automatically, because you've been trained to be polite to men who matter. The next day, he finds a reason to speak to you, asks you about the Queen's health, or compliments your embroidery, or mentions some book you've definitely never read, but nod along with anyway. You're not stupid. You know what's happening. You just don't know how far it will go. If the Queen doesn't notice, you might be spared. He might lose interest after a few days, or shift his attention to someone younger, blonder, richer. You'll be relieved, humiliated, but relieved. Because the moment the Queen becomes aware, the moment she senses you might be drawing even a fraction of the attention that should be hers, the ground beneath you begins to crack. It doesn't matter if you've done nothing. It doesn't matter if you didn't ask for it. Your guilt is assumed. Your innocence is irrelevant. Sometimes the Queen reacts subtly. She stops looking at you, stops asking for your help, removes you from her inner circle without a word. Other times, she reacts with surgical cruelty, a comment about your appearance delivered in front of guests, an accusation whispered into the King's ear, a sudden reassignment to some distant, irrelevant task. You'll find yourself delivering messages to the laundry or spending hours cataloguing fabrics in a freezing storage room. It's not about punishment, it's about erasure. But maybe, and this is worse, maybe the courtier actually does love you. Maybe he's young, foolish, and bold enough to believe that love is more powerful than politics. He writes you a letter. He catches your hand when no one's looking. He says your name with a softness that feels dangerous. You feel something in return, whether it's real affection or the hunger for someone who sees you. Either way, you're in trouble. Because now you're part of a story that can't end well. If the Queen finds out, and she always does, the consequences multiply. You're not just a distraction anymore, you're a threat. You might be seen as trying to climb above your station, as setting a trap, as angling for a marriage that could unbalance the court. You're summoned, questioned, possibly slapped. The courtier is scolded, or worse, sent away. You are not sent anywhere. You are dropped, like a disease everyone's pretending they were never exposed to. If you're lucky, you'll be married off. Not to the man you cared for, of course. That would be too simple. You'll be handed to someone irrelevant, a cousin with debts, a minor noble with a limp, and 5 children from his last marriage. It's a solution. It removes you from court. It satisfies appearances. And it ensures your future is tied to a man who will never let you forget what your value once was and no longer is. Worse still is what happens if you end up pregnant. It's rare, but not unheard of. Someone always thinks they can be careful enough. Careful doesn't exist here. If you conceive, your life unravels in a matter of days. There's no hiding it. There's no mercy. You'll be interrogated, publicly humiliated, declared a disgrace to your family and your queen. The father might be punished, he might not. You? You're done. The best case scenario is exile. The worst is something quieter. A cup of wine that makes you sleep too long. A broth that doesn't quite agree with you. Even if the child is born, it won't stay yours. It will be claimed by someone else, hidden in some manner, raised by people you'll never meet. You'll hear rumours about the child's health, about who's raising it. You'll never know if they're true. You won't be allowed to ask. You'll return to court as if nothing happened, or you won't return at all. And yet in the quiet hours, love still creeps in. It's a hard thing to avoid entirely when you spend your life starving for kindness. A shared joke, a whispered compliment, a hand brushing yours when passing a pitcher of wine. It's enough to spark something, even when you know how the story ends, because you've been so carefully taught to smile, to charm, to flirt just enough, but not too much, that eventually someone reads it as permission. And maybe you do too, just for a moment. But there's no safe version of this, no quiet romance at court that doesn't cost you something. The Queen's jealousy, the court's cruelty, your own sense of safety. You've seen it destroy better women than you, women who are smarter, more cautious, more deserving of a little tenderness. It didn't save them, it won't save you. So you bury it. Whatever flickered inside you, you snuff it out. You become cold or seem to. You ignore the glances. You return the notes unread. You learn to make your voice flat when asked about love, as though it's a subject beneath you. And in a way, it is. Not because you're above it, but because you can't afford it. Because here, love is not an escape. It's a noose disguised as a ribbon. You were never meant to matter. Not really. You don't own land. You don't make policy. You don't command troops or sign decrees. And yet, you're part of the machine, whether you want to be or not. You are a piece on the board, positioned by others, manoeuvred without consent, and sacrificed as needed. Politics at court is a blood sport, and you are soft-bodied and unarmed, but you're still on the field, and pretending not to be won't save you. The games begin before you even realise you're playing. You're placed beside the daughter of a Protestant sympathiser during morning prayers. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe someone's watching to see if you flinch when she kneels. Maybe someone wants to see if you cross yourself with enough conviction. You attend a dinner and find yourself seated between two courtiers who despise one another. That, you learn, is never accidental. Your mere presence becomes a message, and you're not the one sending it. The court is always choosing sides, religious, political, personal, and most of the time, you won't know which side you're on until it's too late. The factions shift like weather. One day, the Queen's uncle is in favour. The next, he's accused of treason. One moment, Catholicism is fashionable. The next, you're supposed to whisper Latin prayers behind closed doors and pretend you don't. You can't keep up. No one can. But if you fail to keep up, you'll be labelled suspect. You learn quickly that neutrality is not an option. Silence is interpreted as disloyalty. Agreement with the wrong person can ruin you. So can disagreeing with the right one. You're constantly balancing, constantly calculating. Every word you speak might echo into someone else's conversation. Every expression you wear might be studied from across the room. You smile too much at the wrong nobleman, and now someone thinks you're part of his household's agenda. You furrow your brow at a poorly timed joke, and now you're being called humourless by a duchess whose husband is under investigation. Treason, here, is not an act. It's a rumour. It starts as a whisper in the gallery, grows legs in the chapel, and is fully formed by supper. It doesn't need to be true. It just needs to sound like it could be. And once it's out there, it clings like smoke. You know a girl, bright, charming, careful, who once rolled her eyes after the Queen complimented the King's latest war effort. It was the smallest gesture. No one even noticed, until someone did. 3 days later, she was gone. The official reason was illness. The unofficial reason was questionable loyalty. You didn't ask for clarification. You just nodded and agreed that it was a tragedy. Marriage is another battlefield. Not yours, not directly. You're not important enough to be part of the major negotiations. but your presence is a tool in those negotiations. You're shown off, paraded, placed beside certain men at certain events, not because anyone cares what you want, but because it suits someone else's strategy. Your virginity is a bargaining chip, your silence an asset. You are decoration in a game of dynastic power. You might be traded for a small barony or a fragile alliance, or to soothe a scandal with a well-timed wedding, and you'll be expected to smile through it. Worse still, your body becomes symbolic. If you dress modestly, you're a daughter of virtue, and therefore aligned with the Queen's more conservative faction. If your neckline is a fraction lower than expected, you're a libertine and possibly an agent of foreign corruption. If you refuse to dance at a feast, you're cold and ungrateful. If you dance too freely, you're making a mockery of your station. It is impossible to simply exist. Every part of you, posture, speech, companions, appetite, is interpreted, analysed, and used as evidence. And when accusations fly, as they always do, you are not given a chance to defend yourself. You're not consulted, you're informed, if you're lucky. If not, you simply find your name being whispered, like a warning. Your bed moved to a distant room, your duties reassigned without explanation. That's how you know you've been caught in someone's game. You don't even get to know the rules until you've already lost. You tell yourself you'll stay invisible, that if you don't align too closely with anyone, if you keep your head down and your hands busy, you'll be safe. But invisibility doesn't work here. If you fade too far into the background, you become suspect. Why so quiet? Why so removed? What are you hiding? Court wants you present, but not prominent. Submissive, but not voiceless. Devoted, but not threatening. You're not a person. You're a balance. A fragile one. Even your family can be a liability. You receive a letter from your cousin, and suddenly people remember he once attended a meeting with a man who was later executed for heresy. You're told to distance yourself. You're not told how. So you stop replying to letters. You stop mentioning your name. You pretend you have no opinions on your homeland, your religion, your blood. You erase yourself in tiny pieces, hoping it will make you harder to target. Sometimes, in a rare moment alone, you try to remember who you were before you came here, what you believed in, what you wanted. But it's all been rewritten, not by you, but by the people who use your face to play their games. You are no longer a girl from a middling family with a good singing voice and a fondness for poetry. You are now, depending on who's speaking, a spy, a seductress, a devout Catholic, a secret Protestant, a pawn of the Queen's faction, a tool of her enemies, or just someone who knows too much. You can't win. That's the part no one tells you when you arrive. There is no victory, no prize for staying alive. The best you can hope for is to survive without attracting too much attention, to fade into the wallpaper, blend into the furniture, and pray that when the next political storm arrives, you won't be dragged into the middle of it. You won't always succeed. No one does. But for now, you keep your voice low, your face blank, and your loyalties as invisible as your ambition. There are many ways to fall from grace at court, but none so swift and absolute as pregnancy. Not treason, not blasphemy, not even public disrespect of the Queen herself. A swollen belly where none should be is enough to end your life as you know it. Because here, pregnancy isn't just a personal matter. It's a scandal, a weapon, and worst of all, undeniable proof that something happened. Something physical, something shameful. And as always, it will be your fault. There is no path through it that doesn't end in ruin. If you're unmarried, it's the end of your reputation. If you're married and the child isn't your husband's, it's the end of your safety. If the father is a nobleman, it's an embarrassment. If the father is a king, it's a threat. Either way, the story becomes yours to bear alone. The man will vanish into silence or sanctimony. You will be the cautionary tale, the ambitious girl who flew too close, the immoral temptress, the careless fool. Of course, No one ever asks whether you had a choice. Consent is irrelevant. The court doesn't care if you were seduced, coerced, or simply exhausted into compliance. If you ended up with child, the assumption is that you invited it, that you schemed, that you tempted a man into his own downfall. There is no innocence, only guilt, measured in months. The signs come quietly at first, a missed bleeding, a wave of nausea, a sudden shift in appetite. You try to ignore them. You pray, bargain, plead with your own body to be mistaken. You tell yourself it's the food, the stress, the endless hours standing without rest. But deep down, you know. And once you know, the fear settles in. Not just of discovery, but of what comes after. Because even if you're never exposed, you'll still carry it. Every step will become a calculation. Every glance a risk. If the Queen finds out, her reaction will depend on how useful you are. If she hates you already, she'll use it to have you removed. If she likes you, she might look the other way, briefly, before quietly distancing herself. Either way, you'll be questioned, not gently. Your body will be talked about in rooms you're not allowed into. Your name will be passed between courtiers like a curse. They'll want to know who, when, how. They'll assume the worst, then punish you for confirming it. The court has its own forms of interrogation. You won't be shackled, you'll be summoned, again and again. Your story will be picked apart by women who've trained their entire lives to smell lies. Your expressions will be studied for inconsistencies. If you're lucky, you'll be called to speak only to the Queen's senior ladies. If you're not, it will be the Privy Council. Men who will discuss your body with all the gentleness of butchers examining meat. And then comes the exile. Sometimes formal, you'll be dismissed under the pretense of ill health or family matters. Other times, informal, you'll simply stop being summoned. Your meals will be moved to a separate room. Your name will vanish from the rotation of duties. The other women will stop speaking to you, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Your disgrace is contagious. If the child is born, it will not stay yours. That's the rule. It will be taken, handed off to a wet nurse in some distant village, or claimed by the father's family if they're feeling generous. You will not be allowed to see it. You will not be told its name. If it dies, and many do, you'll be informed with a single sentence, if at all. You'll be expected to grieve privately, quietly, and never speak of it again. And then there's the matter of surviving childbirth, which, for all your fears about scandal and punishment, may still be your biggest danger. The birthing chamber is not a place of healing. It is a place of risk, of blood, of prayer. You'll lie in a bed surrounded by women who pretend they're midwives, watched by a priest who mumbles blessings between deathbed rites. You will scream, but not too loudly. Cry, but not so much. It's interpreted as weakness. If your labour goes long, and it likely will, you may be bled to balance the humours, or given herbs that do nothing but make you vomit harder. If the child emerges, whole and breathing, you'll be called lucky. If you emerge, torn and fevered, but still alive, you'll be called fortunate. But most of all, you'll be called quiet. That's what they want. Not healing, not closure, just silence, because the court doesn't care about your suffering. It cares about its reputation. And your body, bruised and broken, is a blemish they're eager to hide. You tell yourself it won't happen to you, that you'll be careful, that you'll stay away from danger, from temptation, from anything that might lead to ruin. But danger is everywhere. It wears silk. It recites poetry. It knows how to open doors without being heard. You can avoid every flirtation, sidestep every compliment, and still find yourself alone in a room with a man who sees you as nothing but an opportunity. And when that happens, and it happens, you will have no one to turn to. Even if somehow you return to court after it's all over, you'll never return to your place. You'll be watched, judged. You'll always be the one who fell, the one who wanted too much, the one who didn't know her place. And if you do nothing, if you manage to avoid disgrace entirely, you will still spend every day fearing the moment it might happen. Because it takes so little, a touch, a rumour, a delayed bleeding, to turn your entire life into a cautionary tale. Here in this gilded prison, pregnancy is not a beginning, it's an end. You never thought it would happen so quickly. 1 week the Queen is radiant, smiling in her seat at Mass, surrounded by admirers, her hand kissed, her every glance the subject of gossip and admiration. The next there's a chill in the air when she enters the room. Whispers gather like fog behind her back. Courtiers stop rising when she passes. The king is seen with another woman. Not his first, not his last, but this one he doesn't bother hiding. And suddenly everything shifts. The signs are small at first. The Queen is less talkative. She starts cancelling her usual walks. She flinches more often, even at harmless things. A dropped goblet, a sudden laugh. Her hair is done more severely. Her gown's darker. You bring her her mirror one morning, and she refuses to look into it. That's when you know something is coming. Something final. She has seen it before in others. Now it's her turn. And you're not just a bystander. You're part of her household, her shadow, her reflection. You held her veil, her gloves, her secrets. You don't get to walk away untouched. Her enemies don't just want her to fall. They want everyone connected to her to fall with her. That means you. You were close, too close. And now your name is being written in someone's ledger, under a heading that probably reads, suspected, or loyalist, or replaceable. People you once dined beside now avoid you in corridors. You're left out of conversations. Your duties are reassigned without explanation. One of the Queen's cousins quietly returns home. Another is arrested. The Queen stops smiling altogether. Her hands tremble when she prays. She no longer speaks at meals, and the room falls silent with her. You start to count how many servants have vanished. It's more than a coincidence now. You no longer sleep. Not really. You lie in bed, eyes open, staring into the dark, listening for footsteps. Every sound outside your chamber becomes a possible summons. You can't eat. Your stomach is too tight, too knotted. The scent of food makes you nauseous. You're so tired you can barely think, but too afraid to close your eyes in case this is the night they come. That's how it always happens, in the night. You've seen the tower from a distance, its grey walls, its narrow windows. You've walked past it on processions, smiling stiffly, pretending not to feel the weight of it. Now you can't stop thinking about what it looks like inside, the echo of chains, the rank scent of stone and fear. You've heard the stories about the darkness, the silence, the interrogations, the waiting, always the waiting. Some prisoners last weeks, some don't last days. The Queen tries to keep her dignity. She still dresses carefully, still kneels at prayers, still speaks when spoken to. But the light in her eyes is gone. Her words are slow now, brittle around the edges. She reaches for your hand one afternoon, and her grip is so tight it leaves a mark. They're watching, she whispers, even though no one is near. Don't speak to anyone you don't trust. You nod, because what else can you do? But the truth is you don't trust anyone, not anymore. Even your closest companions begin to pull away. Not out of cruelty, out of fear. They have families, futures. They're trying to survive just like you are. The Queen is a sinking ship and the court is already rowing towards shore. Everyone wants to believe they'll be spared if they keep their heads down, that the axe won't fall if they pretend not to see it being sharpened. You want to believe it too, but you've seen enough to know better. The charges come suddenly like thunder. Treason, adultery, sorcery maybe, whatever fits, whatever will stick. The Queen is confined. You are questioned. Not formally, not yet. But people begin asking where you were on certain nights, who you've spoken to, whether you noticed anything unusual. The questions are always friendly, concerned. But you know better than to believe that tone. You know the difference between curiosity and hunting. You don't cry, not because you're brave, but because your body has stopped allowing it. The fear has gone beyond emotion now. It's chemical. Your pulse is a drumbeat of panic. You jump at shadows. You speak less, breathe less, move less. The goal is to vanish in place, to become so unremarkable that no one remembers you were ever involved. You begin to prepare. You hide a small bundle of things, a hairbrush, a shift, a rosary, in case you need to run. Though where would you go? The court is the centre of everything. Beyond it lies obscurity, or poverty, or worse. But staying is also a risk. You're trapped in a maze where all the exits are locked, and every door might open into a cell. When the queen is finally taken, not executed, not yet, just removed, the silence is worse than any screaming. The court carries on, as if nothing happened. The musicians still play. The meals are still served. The king is already smiling at someone new. You're expected to do the same. To show no grief, no hesitation, no trace of loyalty. Any sign of mourning will be interpreted as guilt. You curtsy. You pour wine. You nod when spoken to. Your soul screams, but no one hears it. You were never powerful, but you were close to power. And now, that closeness has made you disposable. You know you'll never rise again. Not truly. You'll be tolerated if you're lucky. Forgotten if you're smart. But every door you enter now is colder. Every conversation shorter. You've been touched by a fall, and that stain doesn't wash out. You learn to live with the fear, even as it becomes something else. A dull ache in the background of everything you do. You survive, but survival is no triumph. It's just the absence of death. You walk a little more carefully, speak a little less. The Queen's name becomes a memory you never mention aloud. And each time a new one is crowned, you smile, as if your throat doesn't tighten at the sight of her. You've learned what happens to women who stand too close to power. You've learned what happens when they fall. If you survive all this, the gowns, the hunger, the whispered threats and favours, the Queen's fall and your own quiet undoing, you will leave court changed, not triumphant, not victorious, just changed. Your health will be broken, your reputation will be delicate at best, unsalvageable at worst, but your head, miraculously, will still be attached. That counts as success now. Not grace, not glory, just the continued attachment of your own skull to your neck. You will not be escorted from court with honours. There will be no ceremony. You'll be dismissed quietly, perhaps under the pretext of poor health or a convenient marriage. Your possessions will be packed by someone else. You will be given a polite nod from a lady who no longer meets your eye, and a brief letter bearing the Queen's seal, but not her signature. If she's still alive. If she's still allowed to acknowledge your existence. Most aren't. Your destination will vary depending on how thoroughly you've been ruined. If you're lucky, and luck by now feels like a joke, you'll be married off. Not to a dashing nobleman or a wealthy diplomat, but to someone distant, dull, and politically harmless. A man with just enough money to afford a wife, and just enough ambition to accept one discarded by court. He'll have a modest estate, bad breath, and a collection of damp books he insists on quoting at dinner. You will listen. You will smile. Because what else is there to do? The marriage won't be happy, but it will be tolerable. That's the best most women get. You'll oversee the household, manage the servants, teach children how to sew or pray or both. You'll do your duty in bed with the lights out, your hands folded, your mind somewhere else. When the crops fail or the debts pile up, you'll smile through that too. You're good at smiling. You've had practice. Maybe you'll have children, maybe they'll live. Maybe you'll survive their births, or maybe you'll die screaming in a room full of women who call it natural, holy, even beautiful. They'll bury you with lavender and whisper that you were brave. You weren't. You were simply trapped. Like every other woman they've buried in that same patch of earth. Or maybe there is no marriage. Maybe you're too ruined, too suspicious, too inconvenient to be wed. In that case, you'll return to your family's house, if they'll have you. You'll be received with stiff embraces and silent disappointment. You'll be given a small room in the back, asked not to show your face when important visitors arrive, and reminded often that your younger sister married well and without scandal. You'll eat alone. You'll sew quietly. You'll listen to other people's lives through the wall. If you're very unlucky, you'll be sent to a convent. A quiet, cold place, filled with the ghosts of other inconvenient women. You'll pray for hours each day. You'll fast. You'll scrub floors until your hands bleed. No one will ask about your past. No one will mention the Queen or the court or the year you lost everything in exchange for nothing. You'll forget the sound of music. You'll forget the way to find clothes. Eventually, you'll forget your own name. But the most likely outcome, the one no one writes poems about, is that you'll simply fade. You won't be disgraced. You won't be martyred. You'll just be gone. Another girl who came to court and left it worse. No monuments, no mourning, no memory. Your name will appear in 1 or 2 records, misspelled. Your letters will be burned by the people who outlived you. Your story will be retold badly, and eventually not at all. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe anonymity is a kind of mercy. Court life is not a legacy. It's a wound. Those who are remembered tend to have died badly. Better to be forgotten than immortalised for your suffering. Better to rot peacefully in a churchyard than hang in a ballad about the girl who smiled too much, or loved the wrong man, or stood too close to a falling queen. You'll carry it with you, of course. The things you saw, the things you did not say. You'll remember the colours of the gowns, the sourness of spoiled wine, the weight of the silence that followed a scream. You'll remember the way women disappeared, the way men laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. You'll remember how quickly favour vanished, and how slowly fear settled in its place. And still, somewhere deep inside, a part of you will ache for it. Not the court itself, but the version of you that first walked into it, wide-eyed, careful, clinging to hope like it was armour. That girl didn't survive. She was carved away, one smile at a time, one sleepless night after another. You don't miss her, but you do remember her. You'll walk through markets years later and see silk that reminds you of the Queen's gown. You'll hear a song that played during a banquet where someone lost their future. You'll smell rose water and have to sit down. You'll explain none of this to the people around you. They wouldn't understand. They think court life is beautiful, glorious, noble. You let them think that. It's easier, because the truth is too sad, too slow, too absurd. A life lived in velvet and silence, surrounded by jewels you could never own, and people you could never trust. A life where your worth was measured in inches, and of waist, of skirt hem, of distance from the Queen's good side. If you're lucky, you're forgotten. That's what you'll tell yourself when the nights stretch long and the memories creep back in. You're safe now. You're no one, and no one is exactly what they can't destroy. That's the end of tonight's slow velvet suffocated descent into a life you never chose. One spent curtsying until your knees gave out, smiling through starvation, and praying the Queen's mood wouldn't end your career or your life before supper. You endured lice, gossip, heartbreak, and the quiet horror of being perfectly replaceable. All for a glimpse of power you were never meant to hold. If you're still awake, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which part of court life would have sent you packing first. Sleep well.